second big theme, at least what we're seeing at Paul Reiter, is that Indian firms are finally looking at products as something that can make money, and finally they're looking at marketing of products as well. And at least among our clients, we have two. One is Ideas Softwares, which runs a product called Ideas Fortune, which has around 2,500 installations in India in the hospitality space. We also have Ramco present here. They've just launched their ERP for the cloud on demand. And I think we're seeing activity move on the product marketing side of things. But traditionally, Indians have been mostly successful with services. And so we have Sumit Virmani from Infosys, which is one company which has tried to straddle both, with Finacle, Automobile, Yantra as the products, and of course IT services we don't need to commit much on. And so we have Sumit to talk about what's the difference between products and services marketing, what's the economic rationale, why is it different, do you need a lot more money if you're going to do product marketing versus services? So Sumit, I've known for a very long time. He was initially a product marketer and now he straddles products and platforms and is looking at the productization of services as well. So Sumit, you're next.
Okay, good afternoon everyone. First of all, let me start off by congratulating Jessie and her team for pulling off such an important fraternity for the B2B marketing community. I've been straddling across both the spectrum for almost a decade now. The models are quite unique. Prior to coming into B2B, I have spent a couple of years with B2C as well. Since my experience is largely around information technology, a lot of examples or context that I'll share over the next 20 minutes or so would be from IT. But like I said, fundamentals of marketing are exactly the same, so you won't find it a stretch to actually relate it across categories. Let me start off by talking about the fundamental differences between the product and services model. Unlike services, where investments are directly proportional to the opportunity in hand, products do call for about marketing and selling something a lot more tangible, something that exists and it's not merely based on experiences. As a result, here the upfront investment gives you an asset that you're not building for someone else, but building for your own organization, which is repeatable, which can be marketed over and over again across multiple organizations. And this leads to the margin opportunity that's available to you eventually, because unlike in services where the costing is largely based on cost plus pricing, in product scenario, because you've created an IP which is perceived to be a lot more valuable, you can charge for the value that you deliver to the organization. In the product scenario, you're looking at solving a problem, a business problem and not necessarily a technology problem. So even the kind of expertise that you need is a lot more on the domain than the technology side. Any business is risky. Products just ends up being a little more risky. In fact, a recent study not too many months ago by Accuport predicted that 80% or more new products launched in the B2B space actually fail. So if you want your product to be in the 20% sphere, you've got to be doing something different. The point I would like to make at this stage is between services and product, the operations model is different, as is illustrated here. The financial model is different. The target group is different. The pricing model is different. The risk profile is different. So can marketing really afford to be the same? Before we answer that question, let me share with you another set of data points. I've just picked up 6 companies across the services and product spectrum and picked up their financial year 10 numbers. What you're seeing on the right hand side is sales and marketing expenses as a percentage of revenue. I think the numbers do speak for themselves. Product companies do end up spending a significantly large sum on sales and marketing. I think the important question to ask here is, what do these investments actually go in? Do they do more of the same thing that what services companies do, or do they do something slightly different? Before I answer that question, I want to show you a basic construct of what I call a product life cycle. We start with an idea. we validate that idea, we define a spec of a product, we develop a product, we finally launch it. There's a brand out there, that's the face of that product. You do market development, you finally implement the product once you have a customer, and then you sustain the relationship through a CRM program. I've highlighted a box out here that you would notice, and this is where I think the debate around marketing begins. Over the years, I have seen that a large part of marketing attention by marketeers like us gets spent on launching and brand development. We focus on creating the buzz and we focus on creating a brand, what technically we can call marketing communication. That's where we end up spending a large portion of our energy, our investments. Now, I fundamentally believe that marketing has an opportunity across the spectrum of the life cycle. We spent the last 1 hour debating about the coolest things in marketing, the communities, the social networking bit. I'm just taking the audience back to the basics for the next 15 minutes or so. I fundamentally believe there are 5 key pillars that marketing need to leverage to create a very effective marketing plan, a product marketing plan, which treads across the life cycle of product and not necessarily begins only at the product launch stage. I call the first pillar nurturing the concept. Now we all know ideas can come out of anywhere. The moment there is an unserved need in the market, there is a product idea out there to be exploited. So what role does marketing have out here? Marketing is supposed to be a department that understands more about the market than anybody else. They are the ones who have their eyes and ears close to the market, right up there. What can they do to generate an idea, to identify a latent need? What can they do once, and more importantly, once you have the needs identified, what can they do to validate that opportunity? Because once the idea passes the ideation stage and moves on to the drawing board stage, the commitments have to be made, huge set of commitments and investments have to be made by the organization. So can marketing leverage the tools that have been traditionally available to them like market research? Can marketing leverage the newer tools being available to them like community and polling to actually go out there and validate the idea before the organizations put its money behind it? The next pillar, which I believe is integral to the lifestyle cycle stage, is what I call test driving it. Now let me give you an example out here, something which is lesser known from Infosys to the outside world, and which is I think one of our newest offerings to the market, being recently launched in the last week. Some of you would have seen the ads by Aircel on the launch of Pocket Apps. It's a mobile application store. I think they're promoting it across channels right now. What do you think it's powered on? It's powered by an Infosys product called Flip, which is the mobile application store. Before we actually went out and commercialized that product, a huge effort was made across running multiple focus groups in different parts of the country, speaking to consumers one-on-one, figuring out what works. Are the applications of what relevant to what they do on a daily basis? Is the user experience relevant? Is the speed good? And all that information was juggled in before a product was actually commercialized. So I think marketing has an important role to play in piloting the product and more importantly perfecting it before you can go out there and announce it to the world. My next stage is the most familiar stage. That's the stage where I think all of us are very good at doing this, branding it, creating a huge buzz around it, firing all channels, building all the cool ads. I don't need to spend much time on this one. But what I do want to spend time on this element is we need to be sure of what we are creating. I believe in a B2B environment, there are 2 kinds of brands that we create. The visible brands and the invisible brands. A lot of brands are to a very, very specific, well-defined set of audience, and therefore they require a very different nurturing approach. They require a completely different choice of channels. that require a completely different execution plan. And as long as we are clear what brand we are creating, we won't be drawn into picking up the channels which create default buzz. The next stage is my favorite stage. I call that stage driving it. Marketers are extremely enamored by some of the metrics that we publish and which only we and our teams really understand. Brand awareness, perception, share of voice, analyst mentions. Undoubtedly they are extremely important and relevant because that's what really the brand measure is all about. Having said that, we need to reflect upon the core role that marketing is playing. I think I'm glad the lady earlier asked that question. How do I measure it? In fact, the CEO and the CFO of the company are only interested in two parameters: higher revenue growth, higher profitability. Can marketing really measure its impact on these two parameters? I do believe it can, and there are multiple aspects available for us to measure these parameters. The question only is, how are you aligning your marketing plan to really commit to the numbers? Are you willing to stick your neck out? Are we willing to stick our neck out beyond the measures that only our team understand? And I believe that is going to be very, very critical in a product environment if we were to justify the kind of investments it will take to build this business. If it will justify the kind of investment it will take to be in that 20%. I think we spent a good time on it earlier in the day about creating communities, creating a fan following. It's a given that it's easier to get more out of an existing customer than create and get a new customer into the portfolio. I'll give you an example here. I'll give you an example of a very evolved product company globally, a B2B product company, where they realized the importance of references. They said, okay, references is no doubt, word of mouth is a big driver in a business like this. And therefore, let's look at the whole set of references we have and see what kind of impact they are making on our bottom line. They realized there are 1700 companies or reference individuals that were there as part of their reference portfolio. But when the data was actually analyzed in terms of figuring out the kind of growth those 1700 people were driving, it was dismal. It was quite a quandary as to what do you do with a set of references that are out there but they're not generating more business for the company. And that's when the head of the business reflected on something called the Net Promoter Score. I'm sure some of you would have heard about Net Promoter Score and what it does for the business. It's all about figuring out who are your biggest promoters in your entire community. Once the data was actually analyzed, they realized that of the promoters across the entire customer base, only 20% were actually being identified as a reference by the marketing community. There was an 80% number out there which was not even developed and nurtured as a reference. Once the problem was fixed, the reference base went from 1700 to 6000 and the growth went through the references were generating the business that they were supposed to generate, and marketing finally hit upon a matrix that made sense to the business. At this point of time, I would like to basically open to all of you the debate on product versus services. And fundamentally, I don't think the debate is about product versus services. The opportunity of playing in the larger canvas is of course available to all product marketers because they're playing with something a lot more tangible. But the debate actually is about these three things. Are we going to play a 20% game of marketing, or are we actually explore the 100% opportunity? Are we going to focus on the necessity of being a support function, or are we going to lead with the opportunity marketing has? And more importantly, are we going to play a function, an art function which will be more appreciated, or a metric driven approach to science which is a lot more respected?